start with this. Well, the former pound-for-pound king, who was last in action earlier this week, Roman Gonzalez, had this to say. He says, my next fight will be for a world title. We have plans to make a press conference in Nicaragua before going to camp. My next fight will be for a world title, and I will be running this morning, said the boxer. Possible fighters I could face are Kazuto Ioka, Khalid Yafai, and Juan Francisco El Gallo Estrada. But I want to be champion again and then unify titles with Estrada because good purses would come from such fights. You know, since losing those two back-to-back fights to Sorung Visai about 2 years ago, a little over that,
Roman Gonzalez,
Chocolatito has been quietly trying to resurrect his career. I say quietly because since then he has been sparsely active. Understandably so. You know, in the second fight, he really got put down. He got put down hard. So it's understandable why he may have, decided to take his foot off the gas a bit, ease back into contention, ease back into activity. But I will say that, he only fought once last year, and he only fought once this year. And while I can understand having a less than active 2018, I think that in 2019 he could have done more to sharpen what he's got, especially if he means to fight for a world title. Last year he fought Moises Fuentes, scored a 5th round TKO stoppage. That fight, it didn't go the distance, and because it didn't go the distance, that, might have lended an opportunity for Chocolatito to pick things up in the following year. Yet in the following year, this year, he only fought once.
Late in the year.
Against Diomel Diocos. In a fight that lasted all of 2 rounds, you understand, 2 rounds. That's basically saying that in 2 years, roughly 2 years, Chocolatito has only been in the ring
in action
for about, 7 rounds? 5 rounds in 2018 and 2 rounds in 2019. It's 7 rounds. And he wants to fight for a world title. I want to say that whether or not Chocolatito can breathe new life into his career, gain a second wind, build momentum, that could see him becoming a champion again and possibly a unified champion. I want to say that whether or not he can do this going into 2020, that doesn't change what he's already done. He is, in fact, a 4-division champion. He already has a very accomplished body of work, a body of work that is so accomplished that if by some chance he does manage to pick up a world title next year, he could very well see himself being reintegrated into the ring IQ pound for pounder. So yeah, because his track record, his body of work, and what names are there, well, it's already established. A win over Akira Yegashi, Carlos Cuadras, Juan Francisco Estrada, who's ranked on the ring IQ pound for pound list here today. By some chance, Roman Gonzalez, Chocolatito, is to win a title from the likes of a Khalid Yafai, or if he can unseat Kazuto Ioka, who is ranked on the ring IQ pound for pound list as well. If he can beat these guys and get a world title, get back in the mix of things amongst the elite fighters at his weight, the argument's already there based on what he's already done and what he would have done, who he'd have to be to get a world title in today's day and age. He'd definitely be a shoo-in for a spot on the ring IQ pound for pound list. I'd have to say that the spot, all things considered, would likely be, behind Vasyl Lomachenko, and if he fights Kazuto Ioka and he beats him, he'd bump him out of that spot, occupy that spot, and he'd be there behind Vasyl Lomachenko. If he were to unify, given everything he's done so far in 4-weight classes, he would effectively move past Vasyl Lomachenko, and he'd be up there with, Noah Nui and Terence Crawford and those guys. I mean, it's a top 5 pound-for-pound conversation if Chocolatito can pull this off. The question is, can he?
Ordinary.
I heard Andre Ward once say in an ESPN broadcast that, not all layoffs are created equal. And that resonates with me here, that yes, Chocolatito has been sparsely active the last 2 years, but there is a question as to whether or not that did him more harm than good, or whether it did him more good than harm. Did he need the layoff? Did he need the break?
The breaks.
Could he come back as a more fresh, reinvigorated fighter, having not been in action as much, thus not amassing as much wear and tear? I mean, this is a guy whose resume is already accomplished, and these accomplished guys, even in fights that they win, there is wear and tear. It does all bear down on you as you go from one fight into another fight. Whereas for Chocolatito, he did only fight once last year, and he did only fight once this year. So maybe going into 2020, maybe we see a fresher Roman Gonzalez. Maybe we see a fresher Chocolatito that can perhaps get back into that elite level pound-for-pound conversation. There are rumblings of that Khalid Yafai fight. That's a fight that was actually tabbed early this year to happen. They were talking about this at the beginning of this year, in January. A potential Khalid Yafai fight set to go down sometime in the summer over there in the UK. Now, obviously, that fight didn't materialize. Things did not go according to plan. There were rumblings of Khalid Yafai potentially squaring off against Juan Francisco Estrada in what would have been a unification match between them, but persistent hand injuries have left that fight on the back burner. That means that Khalid Yafai could very well end up fighting Roman Gonzalez before he ever locks horns with Juan Francisco Estrada, if he locks horns with him at all. And I dare say that given all of Chocolatito's experiences throughout varying weight classes, the level at which he has competed in retrospect with Khalid Yafai, I think that that's a winnable fight for Chocolatito. I do. I'm not saying that he's a lock to win it. I'm saying that he stands a fighting chance. He does. I don't think that's wide-eyed optimism. I don't think that's far-fetched to say. Khalid Yafai is a good fighter, yeah, but he hasn't competed quite at the same level as a Chocolatito. He's never really been in that pound-for-pound conversation. I understand that he may not have as much wear and tear as Choco, and he's certainly not on the rebound the way that Choco is in what is a rebuilding process. But Cal has had some lackluster showings in the past, and if that version of Khalid shows up the night of a Chocolatito fight, well, Chocolatito ends up back in the mix of everything. It could very well happen that way. I also happen to think that Chocolatito stands a good chance against Kazuto Ioka. I mean, I think he stands a fighting chance with these guys. I do.
Every man with 2 arms and 2 legs stands a chance.
Look at these stories, I hear this news, and I tell myself that, I don't think that I can quite count Chocolatito out in any of these situations. I think he stands a fighting chance. I understand that he's on the rebound, and because he climbed so high, the descent after the ascent makes the fall from grace that much harder. But you know what? Look at Nonito Donaire, okay? Everyone all but counted him out. They thought his career was over. And that was when he joined the World Boxing Super Series. Nobody gave him any kind of odds to make it past Zolani Tete and just these guys that were there. He makes it to the end. A happy turn of chance. And he gives Naoya Inoue a run for his money. I mean, hardest fight I've seen Naoya Inoue in the entirety of his career. That's what happened, and that was Nonito Donaire. Nonito has been through the ringer more times than Chocolatito has. Nonito has more professional losses than Chocolatito has. Chocolatito's 32 years old. I understand that the little guys in those weight classes, they don't really age like wine. They really do happen to age like fruit. But part of me feels that Chocolatito has a legitimate chance to become a world champion again. That's all I'm saying. So, I'm looking forward to what 2020 brings, not just for the division, but for Chocolatito in particular. Could we see him become a world-class world champion yet again? And I dare say it's a genuine possibility. Now, just in keeping with the theme of all things Superfly, very recently, the WBO's Super Flyweight champion, ahead of what is his mandated title defense of the WBO title, Kazuto Ioka, was asked about potentially having to face his countryman, Kosei Tanaka, if and when Kosei moves up to Superfly next year. For those of you that are not already aware, Kosei Tanaka is the WBO champion at flyweight, and it is rumored that he's going to be moving up very soon into Superfly next year. And this would effectively make him, not just Kazuto Ioka's problem, but everybody's problem. Most people don't realize how stacked the super flyweight division is, but let me tell you something. In the super flyweight division, you've got Juan Estrada holding the WBC title, Cal Yafai, who we just talked about, holding the WBA title. You've got Kazuto Ioka holding the WBO title, and you have Jerwin Ancajas holding the IBF title. And in the ranked standings, you have Maloney, you have Sorum Visai, you have
Roman Martinez, Chocolatito, who we just talked about. And you even have the ghost of Donnie Nietes. And I say the ghost of Donnie Nietes because Donnie hasn't had a fight this entire year, you understand. That's the same Donnie Nietes that vacated the WBO title when he was forced to defend it against Ashton Palikte. Ashton Palikte, who he had fought at least once before. You know, Donnie's rationale, his reason for having vacated the WBO title was because he said he was going to pursue bigger things, better fights. And since vacating the title, he really hasn't pursued anything. I get the sneaking suspicion that Donnie's very close to retiring. I mean, he is 37 years old. He has had a very accomplished career, and I suspect that that's what's next for him, because it can't be good for a 37-year-old fighter to spend the entirety of the year on the couch. Better still, he is in those ranked standings. If Kosei Tanaka moves into the super flyweight division next year, you're going to have a very stacked weight class with any variety of fights, any variety of names. You can mix and match and almost always get an action-packed fight. But back to Kazuto. You know, Kazuto didn't seem too keen on having to defend his title against his countryman Kosei Tanaka, and in all likelihood it could happen that way because Kosei Tanaka is the WBO champion at flyweight. Most people don't realize this 24-year-old kid is already very accomplished, okay? He is a 3-division champion. If he moves up and wins a belt at Superfly, that would make him a 4-division champion. His accomplishments are the reason that he holds a spot on the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list. He's seated at number 9 ahead of Josh Taylor, who is seated at number 10. You might feel so inclined to ask, well, why is a 3-division champion seated so low on the list? And it's because, yes, Kosei has been a champion in 3 weight classes, but his resume doesn't yet have the substance, the quality of competition that you would find on a Vasily Lomachenko's resume, or a Naoya Inoui's resume, to where it's not just vacant titles that he's winning, he is unseating world champions, top comp, top tier, top shelf quality competition. That's really what Kosei's more or less missing, though he is very accomplished for what is a 24-year-old fighter that sports an unblemished record. He's got a record of 14 wins, 0 losses, with 8 knockouts, and he's already a 3-division champion. He goes up there to Superfly, he could become a 4-division champion.
It could happen.
And the kid's, he's got a fan-friendly aesthetic. This is not the kind of fighter to where you're going to get bored watching him. This kid likes to throw punches, and he knows how to hurt a guy. The fact that he's 24 years old and his body is still growing, he could easily fill out in the super flyweight division. Perhaps he arrives there and he gets there stronger than he was at flyweight. You know, it could happen that way because he's a young guy with a lot of upside. And it seems that Kazuto, he wasn't too keen on the idea of fighting Kosei. He's more focused on this mandated title defense he's got to make
Against Centron.
Hey, the Centron from out of Puerto Rico, a guy who comes from a very good amateur background, represented the island 2 times in the Olympics. Has a pro record of 11 wins, no losses, with 5 knockouts. It could be that perhaps Kazuto wasn't keen on discussing a Kosei Tanaka fight because he doesn't want to take his eyes off the ball. He knows he's got a live one in front of him with Javier, comes from a very good amateur background, and he can't afford to focus on what fights may happen in the future when he's got so much to deal with in the present. That is one way of explaining why Kazuto might have blown off the idea of having to fight Kosei Tanaka. That's not an immediate threat to him. The immediate threat really is Javier. It could be that way. Or it could be that, put simply, maybe Kazuto sees something in Kosei that he doesn't like. You know, Kazuto's got a couple of years on Kosei. He's got, 5-6 years on that guy? Kazuto's a grown guy. He's had his fights. He's been through the ringer at least 2 times. You know, he's lost 2 fights. Maybe he looks at Kosei as a guy who could be a real problem in the future. There are any variety of ways of interpreting Kazuto's reaction to the prospect of facing his countrymen. There are any variety of ways you can interpret that. But I'm not going to jump to any conclusions. I'm not going to use the D word, the word that I think gets thrown around far too much in the sport of boxing, the duck word. You can't accuse Kazuto Ioka of ducking or preemptively ducking Kosei Tanaka based on him not entertaining a conversation ahead of what is a mandated title defense against a legitimate threat. In those situations, a lot of fighters sometimes, they don't want to talk about what happens afterwards because they've got to deal with what's in front of them. And that could be how Kazuto's dealing with the situation. So I'm not going to jump to conclusions just yet.
Exactly.
It just so happens that Kazuto's going to be defending that title against Cintrone this upcoming Tuesday on the 31st of the month in a card that will not only feature Kazuto, but it will feature Kosei as well. It's going down in Japan. Kosei is going to be fighting on that card. He's going to be defending his WBO flyweight title against China's own Wulan Tulehazi.
24 years old.
Has a pro record of 13 wins, 3 losses, 1 draw.
6 knockouts.
With 6 knockouts. Sometimes boxing media are a lot like boxing fans. I mean, in many ways, they're the same thing, It's probably how they end up in that racket. Better still, they exhibit sometimes the same impatience that the fans do with their line of questioning that, there is a Kosei Tanaka fight to be addressed, but both of these guys have got title defenses in front of them, and I don't think it behooves either of them to look past their opponents. Before you go worrying about what could be Tanaka versus Ioka, those guys have got something else to worry about. And like I said, maybe that's why Kazuto blew off the line of questioning, or he didn't really have much to say about it. Could be that way. Look, hindsight is 20/20, and if Kazuto holds on to his WBO title, we'll have plenty of time next year to find out what's what. What's the real reason he didn't seem too keen on fighting Tanaka? We'll find out, but for now, they really do have something to deal with in front of them, and that really is the first order of business. There really are any variety of stories, cautionary tales in the sport of boxing about what could happen if you end up looking past the guy that's right in front of you. Don't underestimate him, okay? Because he could give you that which you would have to bounce back from. So maybe that's what we're looking at. We'll see.